Lindsay is an acquisition manager at a fancy company in New York. She loves the job she does, and it makes her feel like such a powerful career woman. As the movie starts, Lindsay is excited about her next work trip to Paris. She and her work bestie Ellie make plans for what they're going to do in the city of love. But little does poor Lindsay know, her boss is waiting to rain down on her plans in the next meeting. CEO of Crispin Group, and Lindsay's boss, Mr. Crispin, announces in the meeting that he wants Lindsay to take over the Killaby project. Killaby is a small town in Ireland, in the midst of which is a gorgeous castle that the Crispin Group wants to acquire. But the deal has been a tricky one, due to the town's council not agreeing to sell the land to anyone. Mr. Crispin wants someone with Lindsay's expertise to manage the acquisition, and Lindsay has no choice but to agree. On the other side of the world, the townspeople of Killaby are excitedly prepping for their matchmaking festival. The elders in charge distribute duties to the group, and here we see Brennan eagerly participating in the behind the scenes, though he draws the line at doing the traditional Sealy dance. Sad about not going to Paris, Lindsay gets to researching the town of Killaby, and finds out about the matchmaking festival that the town is holding during her visit there. Ellie is excited for Lindsay to meet many eligible Irishmen, but all that Lindsay is interested in is making the deal. Though knowing that her grandmother was from Ireland does make Lindsay feel excited to get in touch with her roots. She thinks about it as she looks at the ring on her hand, which belonged to her grandmother. Lindsay arrives in Killaby, and her first stop is the castle. She enters, taking a look around the magnificent-looking place, when she runs into a man dancing with a broom in the corner. He turns, and it's Brennan. He stops dancing and mistakes Lindsay for a tourist, telling her that the castle isn't open for a visit yet. He starts showing her around, telling her about the rich history of Balladonnel Castle, and Lindsay recognizes Lady Balladonnel in a portrait. She was the one who first started the matchmaking festival. Brennan is impressed by her well-researched knowledge. Lindsay tells them that she's nothing if not well-researched. He goes on to tell her that Lady Balladonnel first organized this event so that the farmers in the olden days could meet women to court and marry. Although they hardly use the castle for all the festivities, and only open it for the big party at the end of the festival, because it's in desperate need of reparations. Looking around, Lindsay can't argue with that. She soon leaves to head to the city. Lindsay checks into the inn, and the chatty couple at the reception find out that Lindsay is not here for the festival, but to give a presentation to the council. On her way to the room, Lindsay runs into 3 girls from Australia. After exchanging introductions, the girls invite Lindsay to grab a bite with them at the pub. The girls all discuss the activities they're going to sign up for at the festival, but Lindsay's a skeptic. She doesn't think that anyone could really find their soulmate at a matchmaking festival. The girls then ask her reason for going, and Lindsay tells them that she's there to convince the council to let her company buy the Balladonnel Castle, to turn it into a resort. Turns out they're at Brennan's pub, and so he eavesdrops on this part of their conversation, and instantly forms an opinion about Lindsay. He's not a fan of her pretty face anymore, and he lets her know it, calling her out for snooping around the castle earlier. Despite Lindsay's claim that she has good reasons to convince the council to sell the land to her company, Brennan warns her that she isn't the first person to try. He stalks off, leaving Lindsay feeling concerned about her proposal. The next morning, the town is buzzing with tourists there to enjoy the famous matchmaking festival. Lindsay, on the other hand, is on her way to meet the council. She bumps into Brennan in the town square. She finds out that working at the festival is a family tradition of his. He wishes her luck for the meeting, and off she goes. When she arrives at the meeting, Lindsay finds that Brennan is one of those council members, though this doesn't faze her. The council's head, Alroy, starts the meeting with the promise of getting to Lindsay's appeal towards the end. Lindsay waits impatiently as the council discusses the case of a fence getting chewed through by a goat, the one where a couple appeal to sell wind chimes at the market, and another one of great importance: what color to paint the walls of the post office, cream or white. Finally, Lindsay has her chance to speak. She starts her presentation by pitching them the idea that her company has for the castle. Seeing that the castle is in need of some major renovations that can drive a hole through the town's pockets, she tells them how the Crispin Group plans on converting the castle into a resort, and how it would bring substantial revenue to the town's economy. But before she can continue further, Alroy stops her, thanking her for her interest but rejecting her proposal, not believing that her company, or she, could be that invested in their area, since she's only just arrived in Killaby, and knows nothing about the people. He tells her that the council will only agree to sell the land on the condition that the castle is kept intact. With that, a dejected Lindsay walks out. Brennan catches up to her, mocking her valiant effort. But Lindsay isn't one to back down. She tells him that she understands where Alroy is coming from, and she's going to really be a part of Killaby and its traditions to try and make a compelling argument. And what better way to do that than to join the matchmaking festival? This baffles Brennan, since he had expected her to back down and walk away. But Lindsay isn't a quitter. She calls up her boss, who is against her staying there for the festival, but Lindsay convinces him, saying that since the council members run the festival, it'll be a way for her to make an impression and show them that she's invested, not just in buying the castle, but in their culture and traditions as well. It takes a little back and forth, but Lindsay manages to convince Mr. Crispin. Brennan, on the other hand, is not too thrilled about Lindsay staying back and being a part of the festivities. On day one of the festivities, Lindsay takes part in a baking class. She comes well-researched, just so she can butter up the council member. Lindsay uses a pastry cutter for her dough, just to stay ahead of the curve and impress Maeve, who is running the class, but her plan doesn't work. Instead of being impressed, Maeve gets annoyed at Lindsay for using her own methods instead of following her instructions. This disappoints Lindsay, but she keeps trying. Meanwhile, Brennan drops in for a visit and teases her for trying too hard. And while she's not looking, the man adds a whole cup of salt to her batter. Unwitting of his treachery, Lindsay bakes the bread with high expectations, but one bite and she regrets ever thinking she could bake anything. And the rest of the activities are no different for Lindsay, as she struggles to make headway with the town council members. And Brennan is always there to make things more difficult for her. Later that night, Lindsay attends the dance and celebrations at the festival with the girls, while Olivia tells her about the cute guy she met at paddleboarding. Brennan and the rest of the council members laugh at Lindsay's expense, discussing about how she failed to get anything right in their classes. Brennan confesses to having put a vial of salt in her bread, and makes the rest laugh. Soon Alroy announces the start of the Sealy dance, which is the traditional Irish folk dance. Everyone in the area participates in the dance, and so does Lindsay. When she notices that Brennan isn't dancing along, he tells her that he doesn't dance. Lindsay begs to differ, having witnessed his moves with a broom. This makes Brennan join in too. With love, laughter, and music all around, the festival lights up with joy. Brennan and Lindsay dance together, and he guesses she learned the traditional dance by intensely researching videos on it. But nope. This is all Lindsay, and her part Irish blood. The next morning, Lindsay spots Alroy at the festival and approaches him with a smile. The man is not too thrilled to see her sticking around, but Lindsay is determined. She tells him how excited she is for his kayak class, but apparently he can't see her name on his list. This disappoints Lindsay, but Alroy points her toward a cooking class and walks away before she can make a peep. Meanwhile, Brennan finds out that despite the amazing turnover at the festival, the town can barely scrape through enough revenue to afford the castle's renovations. Lindsay ends up signing up for the cooking class, and turns out it's Brennan's dad who's teaching it. The old man asks Brennan to stay back for the class, because they are short one person for a pair, and Brennan agrees. At the class, as luck would have it, Brennan and Lindsay are paired together, and Lindsay learns how to cook Irish stew. As she attacks a poor carrot with her amateur peeling skills, Brennan begs for mercy, but Lindsay insists to learn how to cook something, since most of her cooking at home is in a microwave. She's happy to be learning an Irish recipe, and tells Brennan that she has a bit of Irish in her too. The man agrees, because nothing else explains the stubbornness in her. But despite all that, he's terrified for the carrot, and eventually steps in to teach her the right way. After the class, Lindsay is satisfied with her cooking, and so is Doyle. She credits her success to having a good partner like Brennan. While everyone gets to talking, they find out that the other couple at the table actually met at the matchmaking festival the year before, and are back here to elope. When they ask Lindsay about her reason to visit, she tells them that she came on business, but decided to stay for the culture. Her travels have only ever been about work, but for the first time, she's having fun outside of it. Brennan arrives at Alroy's office to deliver some papers, and finds him assigning matches for the matchmaking festival. He talks to the old man about the castle, and Alroy confirms that they are indeed in deep waters, and might need to sell it, but he'll hold on as long as possible. Talking about Lindsay, Alroy says that she's welcome to make them another offer, but he could still deny it. On another note, Alroy is having difficulty finding a match for Lindsay, and Brennan tells him she might not be interested in something like that. But Alroy reminds him how, at this festival, everyone gets a match. But it seems from Brennan's face that he has had some bad history with the matchmaking festival. On his way to fix up the castle, Brennan runs into Lindsay. She's noting down the recipes his dad gave her to take home with her. She offers to help him fix up the castle, and they head off inside. It's evident that the castle is in bad shape, but it still holds well. After they're done, the two get to talking, and Brennan recounts that after graduating from university, he returned to Killaby to work with his parents at the pub. Lindsay shares her story as well, telling him that she moved to New York after school, got an internship at her current company, and then never left. Brennan then offers to show her the best view of the castle, and takes her up to the roof. And as expected, Lindsay is taken by the beauty of this town once again. As she hears Brennan talk more about the castle, she learns that he is attached to this place and fears losing it. Later that night, while talking to Ellie, Lindsay gets grilled about spilling the tea on the cute Irish guy. But much as she would like it, Lindsay is sad to report there is no Irish romance scope in her future. Or at least, so she thinks. The next morning, Brennan heads a tour bus to the cliffs of Moher. As everyone settles in, one last guy comes running in and takes up a seat with Lindsay. Brennan is disappointed to see it, since he wanted to sit next to her. But he sits in front of them and enjoys the torturous conversation Lindsay has to go through while her seat buddy, Grant, goes on and on talking about mulch, among his many other interests. At the destination, Brennan sees Lindsay enjoying the view and decides to keep her company. They talk about the beautiful views, and Brennan cooks up a story about a mythical legend, making Lindsay laugh. As they're headed back, she asks him if he was ever matched with someone at the festival. He tells her that he was, and also ended up getting engaged to the woman. But things didn't work out, since she didn't have plans to stay in Ireland. Lindsay feels sorry for the guy, but he assures her that it's all in the past. And besides, he loves being a part of Killaby's culture, and wouldn't leave it for anyone. They spot Grant chewing off a random couple's ears and feel bad for them. Later at night, while doing inventory at the pub, Brennan's father brings up the topic of expanding the whiskey venture, but Brennan doesn't want to get into that discussion again. He's more than happy doing small batches for the pub, and wishes for things to be left that way. Passing by a jewelry store named JTK Jewelers, Lindsay spots a ring the same as hers in the display. She arrives at the pub, and is pleasantly surprised to see how busy the place is. Brennan asks her if she'd lend a hand to him, and she agrees. When the rest of the town council members see her behind the bar, they don't know how to feel about Lindsay's smooth transition into being one of them. After the day is over, Brennan and Lindsay wind down with some whiskey at the bar. They talk some more, and Lindsay asks him how he got into the whiskey business. Brennan tells her about the history of his pub, and how it's been in his family for generations. Eventually, the whiskey that suits Lindsay's taste the most is the first batch of whiskey Brennan ever made. It's like they're meant to be. The next day, the girls arrive at the speed dating event, and Lindsay is reluctant to join in. But when she sees that Brennan is also in the group, she agrees. After a few boring men, it's Brennan's turn to woo Lindsay, but she finds out he's only here as a coach, and not a participant. When Lindsay sees that chatty Grant from the bus is fast approaching her, Brennan comes to her rescue, and the two bolt out of there. Laughing and giggling, they make a run for it, and Lindsay is saved. Brennan then takes her along on an errand, and they drive away from the town. Lindsay gives Brennan a hand with loading the grains for his whiskey, and finds out that the owner of the farm works for the National Archives, and is privy to the information on all people around the small towns. This gives her an idea, and she asks the farm lady to look up her grandmother's name in the database. After a few tries, Lindsay finds out that her grandmother was actually from around the area. She excitedly gets her old address, and Brennan offers to drive her up there. But when they arrive at the address, Lindsay is heartbroken to find that her grandmother's childhood house is no longer standing. Disappointed, she wants to leave, but Brennan suggests she should walk the same route that her grandmother did, just to feel how she might have felt. Lindsay loves the idea and appreciates his help. They two set out on a walk, and Brennan fills her in on the history of the area they're walking along, making up half the stuff as he goes. Giggling and laughing as they talk, they walk past the most beautiful land Lindsay has ever seen. Later, they walk around the ocean, still talking and enjoying each other's company. Lindsay asks him then why he doesn't expand his whiskey business, instead of selling it at the pub. But Brennan tells her that he likes things the way they are now. He loves making whiskey, but if he makes it official, that might take the fun out of it. Lindsay argues that her job is official too, but she has fun, though she wishes that she could take more of a role in a project than just making sure the acquisition is smooth. She'd like to stay in a place and see the hotel she acquired built from start to finish. For what it's worth, Brennan thinks she'd be good at that job as well. The next day, Lindsay makes a request to Elroy for a spot at the council meeting, but the old man invites her out for a walk with him. While walking the grounds of Belladonnel, Elroy talks to her about his late wife, who was also an American. In fact, he met her at the matchmaking festival, and she never left. Though he does believe if she were still alive, she'd ask him to sell the castle. With the amount of work and maintenance it needs, Elroy doesn't think the town can handle the budget. But of course, even his late wife would have wanted him to sell it to the right person. Lindsay understands where he's coming from, and they get to talking about the exact deal to be made. But Lindsay is freaking out over the responsibility on her head, because this project is seemingly more personal than the rest. She calls up Ellie, ranting to her about how if this deal sails through, then Lindsay will be responsible for whatever happens to the townspeople and their livelihoods. They all depend on the castle. At the pub, Brennan's dad overhears his conversation with Rory about a tourist girl that Rory likes. This makes the old man think about the happiness on Brennan's face all week. When he points it out, Brennan draws a line. The old man backs off, but just tells him that he's allowed to find happiness again, whenever he's ready. Brennan arrives at the municipal office, and sees Lindsay walking out of Elroy's office. She tells him she was going over the points for the deal with Elroy, and Brennan is shocked to know that the decision to sell the castle has been made final. He gets a little mad at her, and even feels betrayed, but she tries to assure him that this is for the best, since the town needs the money this deal will bring them. She promises that the council members will have a say in the project as well, but Brennan is bitter about this whole thing. He's upset to let go of the castle that he is so attached to. Lindsay tells him that this hasn't been easy for her either, because this is the first time she's wanted to pull out of a deal, and it's only because of him. At the council meeting, Brennan and Elroy convince the others that selling the castle is the right thing to do for the town. On the other hand, Lindsay finds out that her boss is headed to Dublin to acquire another property. And since they only need one property in Ireland, the choice would be either Killaby or Dublin, depending on all costs and measures. This news isn't too reassuring for Lindsay. In a meeting with Ulroy and Brennan, Lindsay tells them about her boss's plans. Though she knows selling the castle will help the town a lot, she gives the council the option to choose to wait. But they inform her that the council is ready to sell, and Lindsay is happy to hear that. And then, Ulroy invites the two of them to be the witnesses to a wedding that he's officiating. As Lindsay and Brennan bear witness, Ulroy marries the couple who eloped. When Lindsay sees the ring on the woman's hand, it's the same as the one she has. The woman tells her that the ring has a heart, hands, and a crown which represent love, friendship, and loyalty respectively. But Lindsay has another logic for it. Since she wears hers on the right hand, the ring symbolizes that her heart is open and looking for love. When Brennan asks the couple about their plans for the day, they tell them that they're going to stay the night at a cute inn that is right on the water, and that it feels like they're staying on a boat attached to the inn. It feels like a blend of two worlds, new and old. And those words are what lights a bulb in Lindsay's head. She takes Brennan back to the castle and pitches her idea to him. She wants to keep the castle intact and build a resort within it. She's sure that this would make the castle a better sale than Dublin, and people would flock to come here. Her new idea has Lindsay feeling hopeful, despite it costing more. Though Brennan loves her idea, he's worried it might not sail through. But Lindsay feels the idea is at least worth pitching to her boss. Brennan tells her to invite her boss to the next day's festivities at the castle. The last day of the festival is celebrated with a grand party at the castle, and he's positive if her boss sees the castle in all its glory, he'd definitely consider their idea. Lindsay manages to convince her boss to fly to Killaby and spend one night at the castle, to see for himself the potential that the place has. As her boss agrees to a visit, Lindsay and Brennan get to work. They assign duties to all the council members, and seek help from some of the tourists as well. Everyone is in high spirits as they get to work, and Brennan and Lindsay's playful chemistry is hard to ignore. After a long day of work, Lindsay is working on her proposal when Brennan knocks on her door. He asks her out for an early dinner, and the two walk up to the most picturesque picnic spot near the waterfall. Brennan finally tells her it was him who messed up her bread. She laughs it off, knowing that he only did it because he felt protective of the castle against the boss woman from New York. But he admits that he doesn't feel that way anymore. Instead, he feels like he has a teammate now, someone who cares about the castle just as much. This makes Lindsay feel happy and relieved. The two lean in for a kiss, but are interrupted by chatty tourist Grant and his poor unfortunate girlfriend. As Brennan prepares for the big proposal party by picking out the right whiskey to celebrate with Lindsay, she gets teased over the phone by Ellie about her romantic Irish escapade. But Lindsay refuses to indulge in any details, because she can only focus on one thing at a time. The night approaches, and it is game time. Lindsay waits outside the castle for her boss to arrive, dressed in a beautiful turquoise dress. When Brennan sees her, he's left speechless. As luck would have it, her ring falls off, and Brennan picks it up, getting down on one knee, and helps her put it on. But they get mistaken for a couple getting engaged by the onlookers. Cue an awkward but cute moment. Soon Lindsay's boss arrives, and they escort him to the party inside the castle. Mr. Crispin is amazed by the liveliness of the town, and the zeal with which they celebrate their festival. This makes Lindsay feel hopeful about her plan. Ulroy gives a toast to all the festival attendees on their last night in Killaby, and invites them all to join them again next year. After his toast, Brennan approaches Lindsay, and she tells him she's yet to make her pitch, but is feeling positive about it. Speaking of pitches, she has a business plan for him as well. She tells him that she spoke to the farmer woman, who has agreed to turn her farm into a distillery at a decent price. Lindsay has a whole business plan mapped out for him, in case he wants to take his whiskey business ahead. But hearing her talk about it makes Brennan nervous. Lindsay is disappointed to not get the response she was expecting, and takes it as a cue to leave. When Lindsay finds her boss, he tells her about his call with the Dublin property owners, and that they're offering him a lower price than before. This is when Lindsay makes her pitch too, telling him that she believes they can make this property more marketable and profitable than the Dublin one. She pitches to him the idea of building a resort into the castle, blending two worlds, modern and historic, and giving people the best of both. While the pitch sounds good on paper, Mr. Crispin doesn't think it will be feasible for them to take on this project, since this will cost them more. When Lindsay suggests that they collaborate with another company, her boss passes on the pitch and decides to make the Dublin deal go through. This leaves Lindsay heartbroken. When Brennan finds her, she breaks the bad news to him, and that is that. He invites her inside to say goodbye to the rest of the council, but she just needs some time to recover from the setback. It's finally time for Lindsay to go home, now that her work is done, and it's not as if she has anything to stay for. Saying this, she selfishly hopes that Brennan will give her a reason, but the man agrees with her. Although Brennan would much rather that she doesn't leave, he has no choice. Lindsay bids a tearful goodbye to the new dream she got so attached to. The next day, after bidding goodbye to the girls and then to the cottage owners, Lindsay heads to the airport. Meanwhile, Ulroy tries to comfort Brennan after last night's disappointment, He tells him that while they couldn't make the sale, it's important that they now know they're ready for a change. The next buyer will come around sooner or later. As they talk about Lindsay, Alroy tells him that he thought she would have been a perfect match for Brennan. But Brennan knows it would have never worked out, because Lindsay didn't have anything to stay back for. 3 months later, Lindsay is set to fly to Australia for another acquisition, but something doesn't feel the same anymore. When admiring her grandmother's ring, Lindsay notices the initials JTK engraved on the inside, and she realizes that her grandmother was from Killaby. The decision is instantaneous, and Lindsay tells Ellie that she's going to quit her job. She realizes that there is always going to be another deal to make, or another plane to catch, but she doesn't want that life anymore. She wants to stay in one place and be a part of the process, overseeing one project at a time. Ellie is supportive of her decision, and asks where Lindsay will go next. Though she doesn't know where life will take her, Lindsay is excited to find out. On the other hand, Brennan is finally taking steps and making things happen for him by starting the distillery everyone always told him to. And though it's been 3 months, he still thinks about Lindsay sometimes. One day, Brennan arrives at the castle for a meeting with Alroy, and is surprised beyond words to see Lindsay. Giddy and happy to see her, he wonders what she's doing there, and Lindsay tells him that she's evaluating the property for her new company. She pitched the idea about the resort to her new boss, and they loved it, immediately jumping on the opportunity. Seeing that the two might need some privacy, Alroy leaves them alone. Brennan apologizes to Lindsay for letting her leave without a word, and for being weird about the business proposal when she mentioned it. He tells her that he's starting a distillery now, and isn't afraid of change anymore. Change isn't so scary, especially when it's for something you love. Happy about being back and seeing Brennan again, Lindsay tells him she'll be living in the UK now, until she can move to Killaby when the castle project takes off. Brennan proposes that they'll need to do a lot of back and forth between the cities, since he still needs his trusty taste tester. Lindsay blushes, supposing they can work something out. When Brennan takes her hand and sees the ring, Lindsay tells him it was actually made in Killaby. And until now, she'd been wearing the ring wrong, with the heart facing outward. But now she's wearing it correctly. Brennan knows what this symbolizes, that her heart is now taken. Lindsay hopes that is the case, and Brennan doesn't waste another second to kiss her.